Hello, and welcome to another great episode of the Gnostic Warrior radio show and podcast, broadcasting from GnosticWarrior.com in San Diego, California, to around the world. I'm your host, Mo, and today on the show we have author Alex Teplish. Alex is the author of In the Beginning, the Epic of the Anunnaki. Ancient legends, myths, and religions from around the world have spoken of gods and angels, not always in the spiritual sense, but actual flesh and blood beings interacting with mankind. Many of these ancient cultures had vast knowledge of mathematics and astronomy, attributing their knowledge as being handed down from the gods. Who are these godlike beings, known as one of the oldest civilizations to the Sumerians, as the Anunnaki? In this episode, Alex and I talk about just that. So how you doing today, Alex? How's the weather treating you there in Brooklyn?
Hey Mo, how are you? Pretty good today. It's been warming up since the polar vortex came through, and it's not too bad today.
Before we get into the great work that you're doing now with the Epic of the Anunnaki, can you tell the audience a little bit about your background, Alex, before you got into the great work you're doing now?
Yeah, sure. So I was born in the former USSR. Now the city I was born is called Odessa. It's now part of Ukraine. Used to be considered all considered Russia. Now Ukraine and Russia are separate. Immigrated to the United States with my parents when I was just 2 years old to Brooklyn, New York. My grandparents came as well. We left for better opportunities. My grandparents were Holocaust survivors, and even after World War II, there was still a lot of discrimination and lack of opportunities in our old country. So we came to the United States, and I've been raised and been living in Brooklyn, New York ever since.
Well, that's interesting. I know you just mentioned your grandparents being Holocaust survivors, so you have a Jewish background?
Yeah, although my family is not really observant, what some people would call religious, we follow traditions, and anything that brings the family together is really what we truly believe in and observe.
I agree. And the reason I asked, Alex, is I grew up Catholic, with my family. They came from Canada, and then here they're French Canadian. But I had recently looked into my ancestry and had a DNA test, and I'm actually also related to the first Jews that came out of Israel and Greece and so forth, and when the Roman Empire had started. So it was kind of interesting to find that out. A lot of us, might have our faith now, but we might have had a different faith, 1,000 years ago with our ancestors. So it's kind of interesting.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, so there's been so many mixtures in history that we think we are who we are now, but we all stem from the same roots, and the various faiths, religions have been changed over time and migrated around the world. But, we're all one happy family, or we're supposed to be at least.
Yeah. No, I agree, and that's what I think is really important, that we look at each other as that, regardless of our faith, religion, what our beliefs are, our truths, is that we accept each other for who we are, our hearts, and not, the color of our skin or the religion that we might follow and so forth. So it's great to be living in this time and to talk to people such as yourself, around the world, and then people listening to us around the world. It's just it's an awesome time to be alive, and I'm sure our ancestors wish they could be here. So
yeah, definitely.
Let's get into your book, The Epic of the Anunnaki. And I want to let people know, is this a work of fiction or nonfiction? And can you tell us about the historical stories that they were based on?
Right. Well, there's a few questions to answer there.
Sure.
The book itself is classified as fiction, as science fiction. It's based on theories written by various authors from their nonfiction books. The reason I classified it as science fiction is because I've taken these theories and put them into a potential storyline. I've envisioned how the whole process, the whole story may have taken place, and even if the theories were proven to be true, the story itself, the characters, the way they're personified, the conversations they've had, will have to be classified as fiction. I wasn't there to see it, so I can't say that every piece of information in the book is true. And even even any other movie that you see or book that you read that's based on a true story, in my opinion, is still a work of fiction. There can be a lot of truth that's in these books, but at the same time, the author does use some creative freedom to insert connecting points and conversations and characteristics of some of the characters that are not easily described in the actual stories by the witnesses.
No, I agree with you, because a lot of the history that's been handed down to us is basically that which is told to us by the powers that be, or whoever might be ruling over us, the people. And a lot of these history books and truths or true history might in fact be manufactured history. Do you agree with that?
Oh yeah, I mean, there have been times where textbooks have had to be updated because some new information came out about our ancient history or even recent history, and usually even within our recent history, it's the victors, the people who win wars or overcome one society or for another, who usually write the history books, and they write it from their point of view. And there's many points of view to look at stories.
Yeah, I agree. And with this, this is an interesting time in history, Alex, where people such as you and there's many other authors out there can explore, these truths or this history, and then write their own books and have, make a big impact out there. Why are they allowing us, the people, whoever the victors are now, controlling us? Or has the game been won, do you think, possibly, and they're allowing this? Or is this, what's your take on that?
Yeah, I think that in the past it was a lot easier to control people. People were less educated. The internet didn't exist. It wasn't such a global community. There was a lot of factions and separations. I think that globally people are coming together. There's still that minority of people who want to be separate or who discriminate against one another or want to go to war. But I think majority of the people in the world, they all want the same thing. They want peace. They want to live with happy lives with their families. And connecting to one another globally is something that is very difficult to control at this point. I think that a lot of authors are coming out with their interpretations, and there's a lot of truth, a lot of disinformation, and I encourage all readers and all listeners to do their own research, come to their own conclusions. Don't even come to a conclusion. Always keep it open, but come to your own decisions on what you choose to believe and don't believe. Don't let other people make your decisions for you.
That's great that you say that as, an author, and then I consider an expert in the history of the Anunnaki. So it's great that you say that and people can explore. When you listen to my podcast, The Gnostic Warrior, I always say the same thing as Alex is saying, that you verify things and you keep an open mind. So that's great that you say that, Alex. Can you tell the audience a little bit who the Anunnaki were and where they came from?
Sure. So the actual book, In the Beginning, The Epic of the Anunnaki, is a graphic novel based on the ancient astronaut theories. Now, the ancient astronaut theories have been written about in nonfiction books since the 70s. There's a lot of books on the subject. One of the most popular researchers on the subject is Zecharia Sitchin. I've read pretty much all his books. I attended his lecture over 10 years ago in New York when he was still alive. And the theory itself says that hundreds of thousands of years ago, extraterrestrial humanoids came to Earth and influenced or even created mankind. And all our religions, myths, and legends that we hear about today all stem from this genesis of interaction between this extraterrestrial race and humanity.
And do you believe that story?
Well, the idea of belief is the word believe itself I consider a very strong word. I don't like to say that I believe something to be true, to be the absolute truth, unless I've seen it and witnessed it with my own eyes and my own senses. What I believe in are possibilities. I believe that this is one of the possibilities in our ancient history. There are a lot of anomalies that connect to the theory. There's a lot of evidence supporting the theory. But at the same time, I can't say without a doubt that that's the absolute truth, that I have the absolute truth, or that I have faith in it. I mean, for me to say that, I would have to have witnessed it myself. And I really encourage everybody else to kind of keep an open mind, listen to listen to theories out there, listen to different belief systems, but at the same time, come to your own conclusions. Don't let others think for you.
No, I agree that you say that, Alex. And what this does come down to, though, there's a lot of different cultures over the last thousands and tens of thousands of years that have left signs and symbols and hieroglyphs and so forth that indicate that this is true, that a possible race came from another planet here and mated with the people here, or they were just some aliens that are watching over us. So there's that evidence that's there, not from one culture, but from various cultures around the world. And then we also have the Bible, which seems to correlate or be maybe a later version of the Sumerian tales and so forth. And we have Noah and the flood, and then the sons of God took the daughters of men. Do you think these are all related cultures to that original Sumerian Anunnaki creation myths?
Yes, so that's really where my book comes into play. I've connected a lot of these Bible stories to the previous Sumerian tales that were written down in stone. There's actually a school of thought called Pan-Babylonianism that stems back to the 19th century, where it's a school of thought within Assyriology and religious studies that considers the Hebrew Bible and Judaism as directly derived from these Mesopotamian Babylonian myths. And that's really what Zecharia Sitchin has studied as well. He was a trained linguist. He translated a lot of these Sumerian writings, and that was the conclusion he came to in many of his books, that these humanoid extraterrestrials came here approximately 400,000 years ago, and not only interacted with mankind, but actually cloned or created humans, as well as some other species of humanoids, between their genetics and the hominids that naturally evolved on this planet.
What's your thoughts on them possibly still rolling and watching over us and giving us just free will? Do you believe that the powers that be, whoever might be the victors or whatever controlling our current reality, know the exact story, or are they left with free will too? What's your thoughts on that? I know this is a theory.
Right. So I believe that there are many levels to it. Some or majority of the people, even in power, that we know of, may not have the whole understanding or the whole truth behind it. They're all doing what their job is and what they're kind of being manipulated to do in life. I do believe in free will, but I think that majority of our interactions of humans' actions on this earth are pre-programmed by our upbringing, by our parents, by the things we study in school, by television, movies. I believe that free will is really only exercised when we take that step outside of the box and say, I'm going to think for myself. I'm going to do my own research. I'm not going to do everything that I'm told to do. I'm not saying to break laws or act wild, but really think for yourself and come to the conclusion or realize that we're all united, and the only way to exercise free will is to do things that are for the benefit of mankind and not for the ego.
Yeah, not just our selfish desires. I totally agree, Alex. And what I'm finding is when people such as yourself and myself do that, and when we're, our drive isn't just about our ego or, getting ahead or money, a lot of us gravitate towards this type of study, whether it be spiritual, Gnostic, or ancient history. There's this inner drive that a lot of us have to find out as much as we can before, we leave this earth and this earthly life that we're living right now. It seems like a lot of us are drawn to this, and people listening to this podcast, the same thing. Even though they're not creating their own podcast or their own book, they're all have this inner desire to know, and they're gravitating towards these type of studies. And the ancient aliens and the Anunnaki and the Sumerians and all these cultures are so fascinating to a lot of us. But again, to some people, they could care less. Do you think the reason it is for us is because we descend from these same people, or we're more closely related than others, even though we're all family on Earth now?
I think that all humans descend from some mixture of the Anunnaki and the hominids that existed here. I think we all have a lot more power and abilities than we've realized. but not everybody in this world is lucky enough to go down a path of not having their mind corrupted, of not going down the wrong direction in life. And too many people out there have just been corrupted, and it's very hard for them to break free. And that's really the true free will, is when you break free of the corruption that's been embedded into your brain. But just moving away from that topic for a moment, I also started out, reading books, listening to podcasts such as yours many years ago before I did my own research. That's the way I started, and it led me into a creative path to create this book, to write the story, and to continue my research to this day. I mean, I feel like the more you research this subject, the more it connects everything else out there, whether it's politics, whether it's ancient civilizations, astronomy, science, quantum physics. It's all been encompassed in my research, and the more I research it, the more I learn, and that's what I encourage everyone else to do as well.
What do you believe in regards to research and our current knowledge? Do you believe maybe this is knowledge that is relearned that you had knew possibly in a past lifetime, and that's why you're so drawn to it and driven by it?
I do believe that when you study quantum physics, there's a lot of evidence that says that we're all connected, that everything is really energy, and there's a lot more to reality than what we see or observe with our five senses. Based on that idea, the knowledge is out there, and I think that's related to the Gnostic views. The knowledge is out there, and it's just a matter of absorbing it, letting it come to you, but at the same time finding true evidence in our reality that connects to that knowledge, and never settling on any absolute truth, never saying to yourself, I found the truth, this is it, and I have no doubts. You should always keep some level of doubt, as I do, and continue to research, continue to find connecting points, and just enjoy the journey.
Do you believe the Anunnaki were visitors from another planet, and if so, what planet do you think they came from, Alex?
Well, the theory is that they came from a planet called Nibiru, which is part of our own solar system and yet to be discovered. It's in the distant orbit of the sun, and may even have its own brown dwarf that it orbits, which is similar to our sun, but on a much smaller scale, or on a much less powerful scale. There's a lot of theories that came out of this that support a binary system. Majority of the star systems that we've observed in the universe are binary systems, and there's astronomical evidence that something large does exist distant in our solar system that has yet to be completely discovered. Now, there's a lot of astronomers that have supported this evidence with the various orbits of our planets, the occasional asteroids that get pushed into the inner solar system, as well as a theory that Zecharia Sitchin came up with in 1976 that was later corroborated by actual astronomers. The theory is that 4 billion years ago, a large body collided with a primitive Earth, which was a water world at the time. The chunks that it broke off created the moon. It pushed Earth into a new orbit. The water that was on that world collected into the cracks of the Earth, which formed our oceans and seas and everything else. And a lot of the other debris ended up being part of the asteroid belt. And that large body ended up going back into its distant orbit, and since Earth was moved out of the way, it's no longer having this collision. But every few thousand years, there are disturbances and there are effects felt on Earth.
Do you believe that the Anunnaki were involved in creating our Earth's religions, or they're connected somehow?
I don't think that they directly had the intention to create religions. What I think is that they existed, for example, 400,000 years ago when they came here. They interacted with the primitive man. They helped various societies eventually create their cultures and their knowledge. But as they took a back seat to ruling humanity, or even left the Earth, humanity had this missing piece of our evolution, a missing cultural evolution that they began to fill in with a combination of the stories that they knew of the Anunnaki, as well as their own spiritual yearning and trying to explain life, but at the same time combining it with the stories of the Anunnaki that they passed down for many generations.
And you see a lot of the seals and the stone carvings. They depict them usually as larger beings than the other beings that are there. And you don't know if those are part of the Anunnaki or not, but they all seem like they were possibly giants. Is there a connection with the Anunnaki and the giants of the ancient years?
Yes, so the Anunnaki were definitely depicted as giants, as much larger humanoids in comparison to actual modern humans in most of their depictions. There's also a lot of evidence in the Bible that connects to it, that describes that there were giants on the earth in those days, before the flood, the Great Flood, and after the flood, that they still survived, which also proves that there were other survivors other than Noah's Ark, which we'll talk about in a little while. So there was definitely a size difference, and there are stories that come from both the Sumerian tales as well as the Old Testament that talk about these Anunnaki, or some of the Anunnaki, mating directly with mankind, and their offspring were also giants, possibly even larger than the Anunnaki themselves.
There's a lot of large people today, and they just seem completely different. I'm in martial arts, and there's a huge difference when I'm fighting someone of comparable skill or a belt level as me with the same weight, as opposed to fighting even a guy that's 30 pounds, or if they're 60 pounds heavier than me and they have the same skills, that guy's going to literally kill me. So I could imagine, in battle and so forth, one Anunnaki or one descendant of the Anunnaki could take out 10 other warriors just with their strength. It's almost kind of akin to like a gorilla, how they are 6 times more strong than the human. Do you think that's where the stories came, and they were the smaller humanoids on Earth telling them about these huge people that are just crushing and killing them? Or did they just look up to them? Were they smarter?
Yeah, I mean, it's a combination of both of these. I think that it's not just the Sumerians that spoke about it. I mean, they spoke about it in the Old Testament. They've spoken about it in many Mayan and other South American cultures, and other ancient civilizations around the world have spoken about giants existing on the earth and how they affected humanity, how they basically overwhelmed humanity until they disappeared, until they no longer existed.
Have you looked into any of these skeletons and these skulls? I know there's a lot of images and websites on the internet that show them, and some look, of course, fake, and then some look pretty real. Have you found any real evidence where you could actually either see it or that these are real skulls that are possibly, Anunnaki or from these giants?
There's actually a variety of evidence that's out there. I haven't seen it firsthand, but there's the elongated skulls. Some are supposedly naturally formed that way, where the skull is very long. It allows for a lot more brain to fill in that area, which can come with its own abilities that we are yet to know of. Then there's also these giant skeletons that have been found all over the world, and there are some articles, even in the New York Times, from the early 40s, 50s, or 60s, where the New York Times even wrote about these giant skeletons being found. Now, supposedly they were all put away and no longer on display anywhere, but they're out there somewhere. And if they are being hidden, I would love to know why.
Yeah, that seems to go along with possibly the powers that be, or whoever the government is trying to hide some of this knowledge from the people. Maybe they believe that they weren't ready, or they just didn't want to have that out there, because that's what seems to happen. I have researched this myself a little bit and have seen similar articles from credible sources, but good luck trying to go to a museum, wherever you're at in the world, and trying to find these. It's just not going to happen. So it seems like that these skulls or these skeletons are being put away in some private vault somewhere, either to be released at a future date or never. So I agree with you there, Alex. You do believe that the Anunnaki are related to the Sumerians, and the Sumerians maybe came later?
Right. So the Sumerians existed around 3000 plus BC, and they wrote about, well, first of all, let me just explain. They were the first known organized civilization on Earth. They had a very formal set of writing, which is called cuneiform. They kept records of almost everything in their society. The invention of the wheel is attributed to them. They had advanced knowledge of astronomy and mathematics. And all of this they attributed in their own writing to the gods, who they called the Anunnaki. They considered them gods or lords who ruled their own kings and priests, reported directly to the Anunnaki. And then the regular people, the regular Sumerians, really didn't interact with the Anunnaki, but they did have an awareness of them. Now, the Anunnaki didn't only have one leader. as far as interacting with humanity. They broke up into many different groups, and that formed the pantheon of gods and the various cults that existed back then that worshipped one god over another or even multiple gods.
Yeah, then you see later, of course, the Egyptians, which were a little bit later culture, I believe, and then they did something similar, and you have all these writings, they're hieroglyphs that document this, and then you have the Greeks who came later, and then, of course, the Greco-Egyptians that had similar tales, and they had their epics, the Homer's Iliad and so forth, and it seems like it kind of carried on and got more fantastic, and as the writing got more developed, the stories were kind of interweaving with these gods, and you'll see them back then, the Greeks had called them daemons, and I don't know if there's any connection possibly to these lords or these unseen gods, the Anunnaki being connected to the daemons of the Greeks, and then later you have, the Romans who took over at the time of Augustus Caesar, and they pretty much abolished all the other empires and started their own religion, which eventually formed under the Catholic Church, and it seems to be kind of the same people, but under a new plan and a new empire. Would you agree?
Oh yeah, I mean, if you really study the characteristics of the gods that the Sumerians described, the Anunnaki, there's a lot of parallels to the Greek gods, the Egyptian gods. There's also a lot of parallel symbols, like the winged disc, which was passed down through many different cultures. The winged disc may represent the planet Nibiru, or even the technology that they had that they used for flight. There's a lot of depiction of actual beings in these crafts in the sky. Not only by the Middle Eastern civilizations, but also the Indian Vedic culture. They also described in detail of these flying crafts that the gods operated. And that's really where the parallels come into play. And a lot of these things are considered anomalies because obviously we don't know of any mainstream explanations of humans possessing the technology of flight or even having this advanced astronomical knowledge that only came about within the past 100 years or so with technology and astronomy, the study of astronomy.
And then now here we are in the last 100 years just taking off leaps and bounds in regards to technology, and we're flying all over, space and, exploring different planets. And do you find it odd that there's a lot of, you have NASA, that they might possibly tell the public one thing and they know, of course, a lot more, that maybe there's a whole race of beings in one of the planets that they're at, say, Jupiter, they got a whole colony there and we could live there and they just don't tell us that. Could that be a possibility?
I think that there could be elements or certain individuals within NASA that have some of this advanced knowledge or secret knowledge, but I don't think that majority of the agency, just like I don't think majority of the government is aware of any kind of influences from the shadows. I think majority of the government, majority of NASA, majority of any of these organizations are just doing their jobs and just, living day by day like any of the rest of us, while there could be some individuals who are pulling the strings and hiding some of this knowledge for their own egoistic purposes.
How do the powers that be get people like us to do such things and just kind of keep working? Is it just money that rules us? Is that how they get things done?
Yeah, I mean, money is definitely a driving point for all of us. I don't think it's the money directly, but it's the need for money to sustain our lives. I think that majority of people are in this constant struggle to earn that money, to pay their bills, just paying those bills, making sure that you don't get evicted, making sure that your kids are fed and they have a good education. We're so encompassed in worrying about those things that we don't have enough time or energy to go outside of that spectrum and really research our own beliefs, research ancient history, partake in creative projects, things that really truly make us happy and bring about unity and truth rather than just struggle. And I think that's what really holds down majority of the world.
Gotcha, and that, of course, makes us easier to control if we're not out there exploring different things. So it only seems like they just perfected the system as far as managing us, their offspring or their subjects to, do what we need to do to take care of ourselves, and at the same time we kind of work towards their agenda. Is there a connection with the Anunnaki and the world's gold supply, possibly that they created humans to mine gold and to create wealth for them and to build this great empire?
Right. Well, Zecharia Sitchin, which is the world-renowned ancient astronaut theorist, he theorized that the Anunnaki's main purpose of coming to Earth was to mine for gold. Now, they didn't really need gold for riches like we do these days, or at least we think that's what it's for. They came here in search for gold to help repair their own ecosystem on their planet, which they needed to basically create these particles, microparticles of gold, and then suspend it into their atmosphere, which would either purify the air or reflect certain radiation, or there's many other purposes that they could have used it for. Now there's recent evidence that gold was used in medieval church windows, and as the sun would shine through these windows, the gold particles would be released into the air, which would then purify the air. There's studies into that. There's also evidence that nanoparticles of gold can be used for cancer prevention and curing cancer. And longevity, there's uses of gold in research. There's a lot of uses for gold other than jewelry and money that are out there, and people seem to be only obsessed with the riches of it. And then to this day, I mean, what are all the governments around the world doing? They're hoarding gold into these giant vaults that nobody knows about. Nobody knows whether it's there or not. And even the latest trend of cash for gold, people are all turning in their gold that they've been collecting for years into cash that they use for their everyday purpose. And that gold gets melted down and sent back to these giant vaults that the governments are holding on to.
So there's a lot of evidence to back up that theory. I agree with you. And one of the things that I've found that doesn't correlate with the gold, but to substances being used to prolong life and so forth, is a thing called limestone. And I know the pyramids are lined with this limestone. And then also I found out that the White House was remodeled with limestone brought in from various parts of the world. And I found a connection there with the limestone prolonging life and avoiding cancer and so forth.
Interesting.
Yeah, there's definitely connections there, and I agree with the gold theory because it's disappearing. I've been helping, watching the financial markets and helping homeowners who are losing their homes. So there's another transfer of not only gold back to whoever the powers that be are and the governments, but also the nation's wealth, where people aren't even owning private property. Lots of them sold their rights to their water and so forth, or whatever natural resources are under them, and now they're losing their homes too. So. Yeah. Again, I don't blame that on the Anunnaki or even the powers that be. I just blame that on bad decisions that people have made. And then, you talking about people selling their gold so they can get a couple dollars. There's another decision people might want to look at as far as they might need that gold for their health or something. I don't know.
Yeah. Also, I wanted to mention, when I look at the Anunnaki, I look at them just like a humanity. I mean, they have good decisions, bad decisions, people with good purposes, people with bad purposes. I'm not saying that if they existed that they are all trying to manipulate humanity. They may have their own factions. Some of them may have left. Actually, in my book, I depict that majority of them left the mission. They finished their mission on Earth, and only a handful of them stayed behind. And those are the ones that potentially have been running the show ever since. So there's many ways of looking at it. It's just like you can't group all of humans into one group. Although we should, if we were all had good purposes, but you can't group all of humans. There's always that one person or the minority of people that do something that's an evil gesture or something that's just egoistic, while there are plenty of people who want to live in peace. And same thing applies to any other race of beings, of conscious beings.
That's where the free will comes down. And I like that you put that theory out there in regards to a lot of the Anunnaki or these beings going back, meaning leave their mission here on Earth, because that would seem to go along with maybe the beings that fell and didn't go back. And you hear about, Lucifer falling, the fallen angels. And that seems to co-align with your theory there that some went back and some fell. And maybe that was because they weren't fit enough to go back to that original planet. And their brothers or cousins, whoever they were like, no, Lucifer, you fell and you must redeem yourself before you can come back and be invited. So I see those biblical tales tying into these theories you have with the Anunnaki and these ancient aliens leaving. And then, of course, some of them staying back. So that seems to co-align there. Then I recently had a conversation with a friend of mine who is really knowledgeable in this stuff, and he's actually one of the top military officials, I'd say, in all the world. And he had mentioned that we reincarnate, or if we are the descendants of the Anunnaki, he didn't say the Anunnaki, but he was talking about reincarnation, and that many of us are having multiple reincarnations at the same time. when he said that to me, I was like, whoa, what's he saying? That this person is actually in 10 different bodies at once. So again, and I'm talking to a high level military official, so I start going, whoa, are these the guys really ruling the world? And am I part of them? Because I seem connected. It made me think about what you had just said, and then I tied it to that government official stating that he also put a number, about 70,000 are here, and they have multiple incarnations. So I don't know more than that, but it just, a light bulb went in my head. And again, this is a huge government official that has been in the military. So, and it seems like they are getting ready to disclose some things out there in regards to the powers that be, that we might possibly be ready or not. But I'm seeing signs of that with, people such as Alex and all these podcasts and different things going out there, and then the mainstream media as well. But at the same time, the old show is going along, where people could choose via free will to either, get stuck in this materialistic fake culture that we have that's based on materialism and money and ego, or they can get more grounded into spirituality. And I believe it's kind of, you got to walk both, because we have to make money, but don't sell out your soul or your family just to make money. Is that we need to explore the spiritual at the same time. We have to earn our money and make a living, because they set up this game that way.
Sure. And I there's a couple of things that things came to mind. You mentioned the government official. There was recently a citizen hearing on disclosure, which brought together many politicians, government officials, military, private sector, and there was a lot of evidence presented there, just on even recent sightings and recent interactions with extraterrestrials. There's also the Apollo 14 astronaut, Dr. Edgar Mitchell, who's come out and said that both NASA are parts of our government, some parts of other governments are aware of this extraterrestrial presence. The former Canadian defense official, Paul Hellyer, has recently been in video format admitting to knowing extraterrestrial visitations on Earth. And they're not even connecting to the ancient interactions. They're talking about more recent interactions. So this extraterrestrial presence seems to have always existed before humanity even evolved on this planet, and still interacts with humanity to this day.
Do you believe that these Anunnaki were involved in DNA manipulation back then in ancient history, then also possibly today?
I can't say that they're still involved in it, but there are Sumerian writings that talk about when the Anunnaki came to this planet, they had toil, they had work to do, and they could not take the toil. They couldn't handle the work. It was too hard for them. They weren't used to it. So they actually created mankind. This is written in ancient Sumerian texts called the Enuma Elish. It's also called the Epic of Creation, and it describes how they actually created mankind right there. And that's one of the parallels to the Book of Genesis, amongst many others. So I think that they may have had their purposes 400,000 years ago in creating mankind. They may have not had the intention of creating conscious beings like we are today, and that may have been an accident that came about. And then once they realized that we were not much different than them, they kind of just let us evolve on our own on this planet, or at least under their control, but not like a farm animal that they originally intended to create. In fact, they may have created Neanderthals as well as some other humanoid beings very similar to us. And now there's genetic evidence that says that modern man, when they migrated around the world, mixed with the Neanderthals. There's another species called the Denisovans, as well as another archaic being in Africa. And I believe that when modern man mixed with these various other creations, that is what created the differences and eventually created the various races that we know today. Now, once those three major races started to migrate around the world and mix with one another, it created more subsets of different cultures around the world. And that's what's formed the diversity that we see today.
In studying history, it seems to be a common theme when one culture or when one country takes over another country or another culture, they actually intermarry and mix blood with that new culture, and they now have a new and improved mixed race culture. And I see this time and time again throughout history when a conqueror conquers another race or another people. Do you think that this was similar to what the Anunnaki have done over time, or is all this DNA mixing just by luck and happen chance?
Yeah, and I mean, I think that it's a good thing when diverse sets of genetics mix. I mean, it makes us stronger. We all know from science that when close relatives have children, that there's more genetic defects, there's more errors that happen in the genetic code. Now, when there's a diverse set of genetics that mix, and I totally support that, there's the genetics. The children become stronger. They have more antibodies to disease and to sicknesses, and they just have a more diverse set of genetics that makes them stronger and more prone to be healthy. So I think that, and this is part of it that was proven, that when modern man mixed with Neanderthals, which now pretty much every European to date has some genetic code from the Neanderthal genes, they became stronger, or at least more adaptable to that environment.
No, I agree. I've had my DNA tested, and I've studied this really well. I think I'm about 4% Neanderthal in myself, and I've studied the same kind of research, and I believe most Europeans, Western Europeans, are about 4% in that area. And I know the Asians, who of course look different, but most of us are considered kind of Caucasian, so we're related to the Asians, is that they're at about 2%. So it seems like the ones that stayed there in the East didn't mix as much with the Neanderthals, aren't as far down in the evolutionary tree as us in the West. And I know Britain and all those lands at one time were overran with the Neanderthals. And I've actually read stories of families having children that come out because these were the first mixtures with the Neanderthals, and they had to kill them if they came out looking too much like a Neanderthal, because that child would kill them. So that was some interesting stories. Again, I don't want to get too much into it, but I've read many stories about that. It's real interesting, all these different mixtures that we have all around the world, and that we're all pretty much cousins. And if nobody's had a DNA test out there, and you're just going by the color of your skin or maybe your religion, you're missing a lot of the boat as far as who you truly might be. And a lot of us, again, are related. I'm related to the Greeks, the Ethiopians, the Phoenicians. I had mentioned to you earlier that my family was Jewish at one time before they became Catholic. So there's a lot of history that we don't know that we could find out if we just look into that stuff. So it's been a great conversation with you, Alex. Where is the best place to find your great work, to buy your book, number one, and then also find more of your work?
Yeah, so the website is inthebeginningthebook.com. inthebeginningthebook.com. You can buy the book from the website. You can also search for it on Amazon. It's available there. I also have a Facebook page where I post expanded materials, post sneak peeks of the book, related content, research, theories. It's facebook.com/inthebeginningthebook.
Okay, great. It's great talking to you, Alex. I look forward to speaking to you again in the future. And if you guys want to find out more about the Anunnaki and some great research, please pick up Alex's book. And then also on GnosticWarrior.com, I'll have a link to his website and also the book as well. So it's great talking to you, Alex. Thanks for spending your time with us today.
Thank you very much.